Well, good morning, everyone. I got 9:02, so we're 2 minutes late. I'll go ahead and get started. I am Edric with Bold Realty. Most of you guys know me already, but I just want to put that introduction out there. And we have a special guest this morning. Today, we're going to talk about land development. How do you find lots and land, and what steps you need to take to actually evaluate whether that's a good parcel of land to buy, whether it's not. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I have no idea how to determine that. I've tried to learn over the years, but I thought what better than to ask a good friend of mine, land developer and builder, Sean Gardner with Precision Custom Homes, to come on the call. And the intent here is to really give you guys some insight on how you can better evaluate lots, land, if you're helping a client purchase, if they want to build their dream home, or if you're trying to find land. There's unlike real estate, residential real estate, it's really easy for those of us that are in the business to evaluate whether a house is worth what the price is, but that's not so easy when we're talking about dirt. And a wise man once said they're not making anymore, so buy as much as you can. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right in and introduce to everyone Mr. Sean Gardner. Sean, say hello.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming.
And just for those of you who can see his background, you know he's in the office. I forgot to tell our guest, our main guest, that this was going to be a Zoom session. So he showed up ready to meet you guys in person. But that's okay. We're definitely going to have him back in the near future because I think this is a series worth building on and for us to really learn more on. So anyways, I'm going to start off, if you don't mind, Sean, kind of sharing with the audience a little bit about yourself. So just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the building development game.
Well, I'm a transplant like most people in the area. So military transplant, like again, most people got out in 2011 and I had started flipping houses while I was still in the military. And then I had set myself up to actually make the transition when I got out to full-time flipping. And we did that for a number of years. And I've known Edric since 2008, I think, or 2009.
Yeah,
So,
too
yeah,
long. Has it been that? It's been a
a
while.
long time. Yeah. And we've been working together for a very long time, obviously, and have a great relationship. But I kind of saw the writing on the wall with the flipping, and I had always wanted to move into new construction. And by that, I mean, flipping was getting next to impossible and it wasn't a real business. So kind of made the transition over to new construction in 2016, 17. And, everything's grown pretty fast from there. And then we got into land development. And so, yeah, it's a snowball and it's rolling pretty fast right now and enjoying the ride. But here we
Yeah.
are. We've got Summerlin that's almost built out, our first kind of developed piece of real estate. And we're starting, we just broke ground on Liberty Meadows, our next subdivision, and that'll be ready towards the end of the year. So
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, and we'll definitely want to know more about that before the end of the call, and not to mention Deercroft, which it's we've kind of been playing around out there for a while now, but we're getting a lot more serious out there because there's quite a few more lots that you have under contract to purchase here in the near future.
absolutely. Yeah, we've got a lot going on out there, and I've got a bunch of lots, and it's just, yeah, we just need to start assigning some floor plans to the lots and start getting them out there to the.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, anyways, I'm not going to continue to throw in my cheap plugs, but if you guys are looking for a nice house, I got the perfect builder for you. Right now, we got Wagram coming out, and we do have 2 listings active in MLS in Summerlin. They just haven't been started yet, so that's all we have, and then we'll be sold out in Summerlin. Anyways, let's just jump right into land development and what the steps are. I guess we'll start from the beginning. And I know you kind of do it differently because you're a developer, so you're coming from a profitability standpoint. But as an agent, as a buyer that's buying something to build my dream house on, what would be the first thing that you would advise me to do when I start my search for land?
Well, I think the most basic step is obviously you have to make sure you can actually build a house on that piece of land that you're looking at. And there's some obvious things and some probably less obvious things, and obviously different steps associated with those things. So obviously the basic thing is kind of verifying that the zoning will allow you to build. But beyond that, the next linchpin, and I know we're going to talk more about this later, I'm sure, because this is a huge component, especially when you're talking about land, which a lot of buyers are looking for. And by land, I mean, 1, 2, 3 acres. Maybe a lot that's not in a city, or a lot that's not in a established subdivision. You've got to look at, most likely it won't have sewer. So you've got to look at the septic situation on that lot. So what I would say for agents looking for a lot when they're evaluating it for a buyer is you've got to understand how significant the septic system and the soil suitability of that lot is, and do the research and due diligence on that, because the reality is if you don't have a septic system, you can't build a house. So it literally is the linchpin to the viability of building a house.
Right. And so how do you determine if a septic can be put on that property, or I guess whether it can or not, I guess, is the question I'm asking.
So there's obviously different steps you can take. For me, I kind of do a little my own research just to have an idea of what I'm getting into before. And I do some online research first, which we should all start at, because there's so many resources available between GIS and Realist and all those different Google Maps. There's all kinds of resources. So what I'll always do first and foremost is I'll pull up whatever the county's GIS website, because all the county GIS websites, it'll show you contours, it'll show you soils. You're on Cumberland County.
Yeah, I'm in Cumberland County. I just pull this up kind of as a reference. Any particular, do you want me to go to a particular county to show?
It doesn't matter. And all the GISs are a little different. I think Harnett County is the easiest to deal with. Harnett County's not bad. The rest are a little trickier, but regardless, you can pull up the soil data on all of them. Again, this is a little more in depth, but if you pull up the soils on it, it'll tell you a 2 to 3 digit kind of code of what the soil is supposed to be on that ground. And then you can kind of take that information and you can pull up, you can do a search for the actual, there's a PDF for each county that's a soil, it's not the evaluation, but it's an overview of all the soils in the county. And you can pull up like what that letter, maybe it's BNB or GAB or whatever it is. You can actually go in that report and you can see, oh, okay, this type of soil, Gilead, something Blarney, whatever it is. And you can read about it and it'll say, okay, this is good or this is bad soil for a septic. And it'll kind of give you an idea.
Right.
Beyond that, you're doing kind of a map reconnaissance of looking at it online. And you can tell if there's any wetlands in the area or anything like that. And if like we were talking about the contour lines, is it on a slope? You're just looking for things that'll tell you the closer you are to wetlands, you're not going to have good soil for a septic. The closer you are to streams, if you're on the downside of a slope, it's probably not good soils. So you're just kind of looking for general indicators that a septic would work. Beyond that, and one of the most obvious, are there homes next to it?
Right.
Because that probably tells you, okay, the soil is good, especially if those homes share the same soil.
Right.
So you can do that kind of initial investigation. And then beyond that, obviously the first question, if it's a lot listed with the MLS, obviously contact the listing agent. Hey, has there been a test done on this? Has there been any evaluation?
And it's not called a perk test anymore. Is that correct?
Yeah, that they stopped doing perk tests, I think back in the 70s or 80s. So
okay.
A perk test used to be they would dig a hole, fill it with water, they come back in 24 hours and see how much water drained, right? Because obviously the intent of a septic system is you have drain lines and they're scattered throughout the yard, right? And the wastewater goes into them and then disperses in the ground. So it's really pretty simple. You want sandier soil as opposed to clay, because clay is thicker, it's less permeable. Sandy soil is more permeable, so the wastewater will kind of dissipate it out.
Right.
The last thing you want is clogged, or you don't want wastewater that can't drain anywhere.
Right.
Which is why the more clay type soil or the more wet the ground is, the wastewater is not going to be able to drain throughout the ground.
So that's where soil, I guess, why soil composition plays such a key role in determining if septic is available, because you got to make sure you're building on soil that will actually drain your wastewater versus, you could, I think someone asked me before, it was like, well, why is soil so important? You could probably build a house on it, but you won't be able to have any functional plumbing. You'll have plumbing issues if you build on the wrong kind of soil.
Yeah, like clay could be great to build on, but not for a septic system. But there was a question. Somebody was.
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Yeah, I had a question.
Sorry. I had a question real quick about in this area, is there a lot of aquifers? Because up north, I know that we have an aquifer to deal with. So like they do well testing and well drilling and stuff like that. And with the septic systems, they have to be careful of the aquifers below and stuff like that. So I didn't know if that was a problem in this area.
That's not from my experience. That's not really an issue with the septic systems. They're not, because most of your actual drain lines are no more than 18 to 24 inches deep, maybe 3 feet at most. So it's usually not, it's really, I've never come into that as a consideration. They're really just, and really what they do just to kind of, because we talked about how they don't do perk tests and what that is. The soil evaluation is they're going to take a core sample of soil, and the soil scientists, they're trained to do this. They pull it up and make a subjective, it's based on a subjective opinion. They say, okay, this soil feels a certain way and it has this certain coloration. So they know that, okay, there's a lot of water in it, or it's sandy or clay, whatever it is. And that's what they're doing for that. I will say though, in regards to the aquifers, the wells and the septic, certain areas like, and Spring Lake, anything on the north side of the town in that Spring Lake Cameron area, there's a reason it's named Spring Lake. There's a lot of underground springs that pop up, and that more really, that can apply to septic, but it can also apply to just normal like grading and drainage issues on job sites.
That's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. And let me just say, because I didn't say it at the beginning, I'm going to open up the this meeting for everyone to ask their questions. So please make sure you're taking plenty of notes. Feel free to chat some questions in the chat box, and as soon as we get to the Q&A part, we'll jump on that. I don't want to interrupt in the middle of the session because I don't want us to miss anything. Our intent is to make sure that you guys kind of know, on an elementary level, what the basic steps are, and then that way you can go out there with a lot more confidence as an agent or as a buyer yourself to determine whether apply to soil is even viable, instead of saying, hey, I found this, my buyers found this lot, do you think this builder can build on it? Because that's, that requires a lot of investigating that I think that we can all do on our end, and it creates, allows us to create more value with our experience as agents. So let me jump into the next thing. And I think that comes along the lines of septic tank versus city sewer. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because you're pretty much as far as where you're building it, is typically places where you want to put septic in. Can you kind of cover why you do that versus areas where you have to go with municipal sewer?
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I want to kind of go back to the last
Sure.
one. I want to get, by no means, I don't want to get too far into the weeds on any of this because, we're just trying to do an overview, but I want to finish that train of thought on the septic stuff for,
Sure.
So we did the online kind of cursory research on it in regards to soils and contours. The next step is actually hiring an independent soil scientist to evaluate the land to see if it is. And then obviously you could also go the next step, and that's kind of getting a septic permit. And we can dig into that later if you want to. And it just, it's funny that probably half this conversation is going to be talking about soils, but the reality is it literally, like, I lose sleep at night because of soil issues that come up or whatever, because no septic, no house, and that's it really is the linchpin.
Yeah.
Okay, but back to
you could pay a soil scientist if you're not doing enough due diligence up front. You could be paying a soil scientist literally to be evaluating crappy soil.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly.
And my understanding is that's not that cheap.
Yeah. Depending on how big the area is and what you want done. Yeah, it could be a pricey thing. And beyond that, soil scientists are busy. I mean, my main guy is 6 to 8 weeks out, and that's for normal clients. So I'm sure you can find somebody quicker, but there has to be a long due diligence process built into any lot purchase. Just a random consideration.
Yeah. Good point. This isn't a 30-day close. This is something you want to be able to build enough time in there to make sure that if you're purchasing a lot or some land to build a house on, you want to make sure that you actually can build a house on it. You don't want to close on it. And I know a lot of you on this call have probably heard horror stories where people buy land and they think they got the best deal, the deal of the century, only to find out they can't build anything on it because there's no good soil anywhere to be found on that parcel. So can we talk a little bit about and I want to backtrack even more because you were talking about earlier how you go in GIS to kind of look at soil composition and it's all coded and that sort of thing. And I think that's where it got complicated for me when I saw it for the first time. So is there a good reference for somewhere I can go, or do I just Google soil codes, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, like if you go to, again, all the county GIS websites are obviously different. I know on Harnett County, if you click on a lot or a parcel, you can actually, there's a link to the soil survey. And if you click that link, it'll download to your computer. I'm not sure if all the GISs have that, but you just have to do a search for X county soil evaluation. And like I obviously, because I do this a lot, I've got them all downloaded to my computer already. But once you pull that up towards the beginning, there's going to be all those different, 2 to 3 letter soil classifications. And it'll kind of give you an overview and description about each one. You able to find one, Edric?
I was looking, I just Googled Harnett County soil evaluation. It just took me to the Harnett County Soil and Water Services.
Yeah, I got one.
Are you telling me to go to the GIS? Were you saying GIS or go to actually to the evaluation where it has the PDF?
Well, I just know on Harnett County specifically, there's an actual link on it. I'm not sure about the other counties.
Okay. And we'll play around and I'll look in there as we go through.
Soil survey, maybe you want to type that in, like soil survey of blank county. Maybe that'll come up better if you do a search.
County soil survey. So now, is this the point where I can ask about septic versus sewer? Or is there more?
Of course.
Okay. So talk a little bit about that while I'm looking around in here.
Yeah. So obviously, sewer is obviously primarily available in more condensed areas. So, excuse me. So we tend not to do that because, first of all, developing land in condensed areas, there's really not much land that actually has access to sewer, and the development costs are much, much higher. So you tend to find land that's kind of further out. I don't want to say on the outskirts, but outside of the more populated areas. So, when you're looking for a lot that does have sewer, really the only consideration is the cost of the actual tap fee, whether that's been paid or not. I mean, if you've got sewer and water, then you're only looking at those type of fees. And if it's already a developed lot and you just have to pay the tap fees, then it's going to be, less than putting in a septic system or putting in a well or anything like that. So that's
if you're building on a lot in a developed area already. But if you're creating a whole subdivision, you may have to pull those utilities to you, and that can tend to get expensive, which I'm sure you're familiar with already, Sean. I can't remember what it was, but we were talking about Liberty Meadows. You ran into some issues with that based off of what the research says versus what's actually out there. You care to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and this is one of those things where you can't win with the government sometimes. So our engineer had done, you need a certain size water supply line in order to facilitate X number of houses that you're going to build. Obviously, there needs to be a certain amount of pressure, a certain amount of flow, as you can imagine, in order for all the proposed houses that you want to build to actually have enough water. So anyways, with the Liberty Meadows subdivision, all the research was showing that there was a 6-inch diameter main water line running to where the start of the actual subdivision was. Well, we go through all these meetings and everything with the zoning and planning and people. And one of the guys says, hey, you may want to check that. I think it's a 4-inch line, even though the GIS showed a 6-inch line. So we checked it and it was a 4-inch line. And now we have to run about 3/4 of a mile of a 6-inch line down Johnsonville School Road to get to the subdivision, which
That's not a big deal. What's that cost you? About $500?
Yeah, no big deal. Yes, chump
That's
change. Yeah, so
yeah.
there's always
So
those.
that's a six. I'm assuming that's a six-figure increased cost that you hadn't planned for.
Yeah, $150,000 added on to the cost.
Wow. Wow. So and this is on a subdivision. So of course, when you compare it to scale, I don't think anybody on this call today has any intentions to develop a whole subdivision, but those expenses, I mean, if you aggregate those to building a house, something that's not in your budget, like Sean was talking about, you got to consider tap fee versus septic, that sort of thing, and all these things matter. I pulled this up on Harnett County site. I don't know if this is what you were talking about, Sean, but it
Yeah,
seems to be a good resource.
that's exactly. And if you want to scroll down a little bit,
Okay.
Page 10, 15,
Okay.
usually at the start.
And while that's getting to that page, all I did was Google Harnett County soil survey, and it pulled up the Harnett County site, and this manual was available for download. So just in case you guys want to reference it, you'll know where to go.
Yeah, go to about page 15 or 16.
Okay.
It'll start listing all the different subclasses of soil. There you go. Just click on one of those pages. Anything is fine. Just thinking.
My internet's a little slow, so.
All right, go a little bit more. Sorry, I lied to you.
Let's see what
Yeah,
this
keep going.
is.
Okay, well, you can see one there. You can stop wherever.
Okay.
Okay, so like on this page 12 here, you see
Sorry, I jumped to 13.
Oh, that's fine. Just wherever it's there. B&B is a good one because you see it a lot. So, like you find a B&B, Blaney loamy sand. What does that mean? Well, I mean, Blaney, I don't know what that means, but loamy sand, you can figure it out. And it tells you kind of the slope associated with it. Usually just go to the end of the write-up on that section. Like, so if you go over to the right-hand side on the top there, and it says right there, the map is moderately suited to most urban and recreational uses, streams, blah, blah, blah. The moderately slow permeability is a limitation on site for septic tank absorption fields. So that kind of gives you an idea right there. Okay, so if I have B&B on my lot, according to this write-up, B&B, it may be problematic or it may work. It's kind of in the middle. It doesn't say it's terrible for absorption fields, but it doesn't say it's great for it either. So, but it gives you information is the point, right? Because other ones could tell you, hey, this soil is always 100 or is always very permeable. It's great for septic systems. But in this case, and this is actually this B&B, we have a lot of that out in Summerlin phase 2, and we've got septic systems on all the lots. So it really kind of depends where you're at.
Awesome. Okay, so let's jump into the next thing. We found a good piece of soil, and we've evaluated that we can put septic there, but that's not where the cost or the research stops. So can you kind of give us some insight on the total package, all the things we need to consider when looking at and we're going to talk in specification of lot. When I mean lot, I'm talking, a half-acre lot up to, like Sean said before, 2 or 3 acres. What are some other things that I need to consider in order to actually develop that specific parcel to build my house on it?
Well, and like we kind of talked about earlier, I think we're generally talking about these onesies and twosies that maybe 1 to 2, 3 acres. People want to live on the outskirts because we have more fixed costs if we're in a development with kind of a predetermined, developed lot. So we know that the house cost, the cost to actually construct the house is going to be what it costs, right? The variables we have when we're dealing with individual pieces of land are, you've got to think about the house placement is really kind of the defining characteristic that'll determine possible additional cost. So things you got to think about. If I've got a bigger piece of land, do I want more of it cleared? Because clearing is a lot more expensive, right? Clearing is very expensive. So if I want a lot of acreage cleared, you're going to pay a lot for it. How far back on the lot am I going to put the house? Because now I've got longer driveway cost. In driveway, concrete is not a cheap thing. Depending on where I place the house in relation to the septic field, if the house is, or if the septic field is at a higher elevation than the house, now my septic system is going to need a pump, which is going to be another couple $1,000s added onto your septic cost.
So is that the difference between a pump fed versus a gravity fed septic?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Well, your pump feds are gravity fed, but it's got to get pumped in order to be gravity fed.
Gotcha.
It starts out a little bit lower, it gets pumped up, and then it drains out and is gravity fed.
So are we talking numbers wise, the difference between a $5,000 septic setup to upwards of 25,000?
No, nothing ridiculous like that.
Okay.
And my numbers are kind of skewed because I'm in construction costs and it's not necessarily retail costs, but probably to go from a normal septic system, you can be $3,000 to $4,000, maybe $5,000 at most, and add $2,000 to $2,500 for a pump.
Okay. So I mean, that is significant increase.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and that's why house placement is really important. And that's why kind of researching it is important. So you've got your driveway to consider, clearing to consider, septic location to consider, underground utilities. Most people are obviously going to want underground electrical ran to their house. In most energy companies, it's just a basic flat fee, minimal, maybe a couple $100s for up to, let's say, 200 feet, and then they charge per foot after that. So again, depending on where you are, that could add up to a lot. Also, if there's public water, which a lot of these locations actually have public water, and you're tapping into that water and your house is set really far away from it, well, now you've got increased costs to run your line, your main water supply line to that tap. Whereas a well, obviously, you could put closer to the house and would be a shorter connection. So, and then what was the last thing? Oh, and then again, in regards to house placement, depending on where you put it is going to determine how much you could potentially spend on a foundation. So you've got foundation expenses, you've got septic, water tie-ins, your utilities, your other utilities, electrical, clearing, and driveway. So you got to consider all those things, because all those things, like a builder could give you a quote on how much it costs to build a house, but it's a complete unknown until you have a lot and where the lot is going, or where the house is going on the lot. You have no idea what those costs are going to be until you know that piece of it. So that's always a piece of the puzzle, and it could be minimal costs and it could be very high costs.
So generally speaking, because I know all these factors kind of determine what the costs are going to be, but generally speaking, what would you say the average cost should be for a suitable lot to actually build an average size house? And by average, I mean 2,000 square feet, general size pad, that sort of thing. What are we looking at range wise for all those things you mentioned? I know I'm putting you under the gun here.
10 to 100,000. No, probably. I mean, realistically, I would say in that 25 to 40,000 price range.
Okay. And so that's something to factor in when when you guys are looking at land, or when you have a client that's looking for land. Even though the land's cheap, you got to consider how much is it going to cost before we can even build a house. Because let's pretend the land is for sale for $10,000 and it's for, I don't know, 5 acres. In your mind, you're thinking, okay, that's great. But now you got to factor in, did you include the fact, and, based off of Sean's best guess, and I think his best guess is as good as we're going to get, 25 to 40 grand, you got to add to that before you can start putting in framing a house. So that's another factor to consider. And then you said types of foundations. There are types of foundations, and that's not what this class is all about. So we're not going to get too far into that. But if you guys continue to behave like you are, maybe we'll do another class and talk about the whole construction process. But at any rate, we've talked about all these expenses and all these unknowns. I guess the next question I would ask you is, and take off your builder hat for a second, development hat for a second, put on your home buyer hat.
Okay.
What would you realistically think would be a good price when I'm evaluating land purchase costs And pre-development, by the pre-development, I mean prepping the pad for a foundation. So getting it to a point where I can start building a house. If you had to put a percentage of how much of my construction project, what percentage of that should be devoted to that, generally speaking?
So getting to before the foundation, is that include the purchase of the land?
Yeah, purchase of the land, getting the utilities in there. We'll pretend there were no hiccups that popped up, and we know there always are, but to get the septic ready, to get the utilities ready, and we'll say driveway, because I mean that's more of the on the other end of things, but generally so I can have a house. The next thing is put a house on it.
Okay, it's a tough question. Yeah.
Here's what I'm asking you. Should those costs be, should I be budgeting for like those costs to be 10% of my overall project or 20% of my overall project, or what? Am I getting a good price if it costs me $50,000 to develop a lot to build a $200,000 house on? I think I know the answer to that. Or should I be thinking I need to be building a $400,000 house on it?
Well, we kind of have to define developed lot, right? Because when I say developed lot, that means it's ready. That means it doesn't mean that there's a septic system installed. It doesn't mean that the water line's been ran. It doesn't mean that we have a driveway, right? So it depends on how you define that. And it depends on, it depends, obviously all builders work differently. I want to answer your question. I'm just trying to think how best to answer it.
Well, answer it that way. I mean, let's say it does mean all those things you said it has there, but we're including those things are done.
Mm-hmm.
The septic's in, the utilities are in, the driveway's in, and I've purchased the lot, the cost for the raw land to purchase the lot, and I've cleared it. Mm-hmm. Realistically, and we'll say, because I think acreage makes it kind of complicated. So let's say a general size lot, we'll say a half-acre size lot, and I've cleared enough to actually have a front yard and a backyard. Kind of how do those numbers play out?
With a lot, I could see probably between 15 and 25% of the total cost.
Yeah. Okay. That's kind of what I was looking for, kind of just to give people some insight, because I know a lot of folks they're working with a buyer that has a certain pre-qualification limit. And some of them may want to build, and they may be looking at this construction to perm, or they may be looking at doing a sale. Even with you, a lot of people on the call have done pre-sales with you in Summerlin. So if they do the construction to perm route, it's really important for them to understand that if your buyer is pre-qualified for $400,000, they need to realistically be setting aside a certain percentage to get to a point where they can even build a house. It doesn't mean they can build a $400,000 house.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's reasonable to say, okay, devote 15 to 20% of your budget to getting that lot prepared and ready to actually build a house on it. And then you have to factor in contingencies. And I know I've heard different things. I've heard as low as 5%, and I've heard as high as 15%. So in my head, I'm going with 10%. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that contingencies should be figured out up front with careful planning, and it should be completely minimized, because outside of the ridiculousness of the supply chain right now, let's ignore that for a minute and all the crazy things that are happening with that and pricing. Your cost 100% going in after you've done your research and done your due diligence. After you kind of start the foundation, everything should be fixed. So if those things are planned out from the beginning, if you've got a 15% contingency built in and it actually gets used, then you
just did a sucky job planning out the project. Yeah.
Crap's always going to come up. It's construction. And as you guys know, everything goes wrong on every project every day, right? It's just the nature of it, right? But yeah, I would err on the smaller side of that for a contingency budget, as long as the planning's done correctly. And again, it's like what we do, Edric, where we really try to answer all the questions up front, get everything figured out, and then it's just, okay, now we can just roll with the project. Everything's figured out, and now it's just a smooth process from beginning to the end, as smooth as it can be for construction.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, because time costs money too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and what I'm hearing, basically what I'm hearing is do your due diligence up front, do your homework up front. Don't get so enamored by what I mean for you guys is don't allow your buyer to get so enamored with how beautiful this lot is. And then you just jump into, we'll figure it out. Take as much time as you need to figure it out up front before you start throwing dollars at it. Because something I heard before too is any lot can be developed. It's a question of, can you continue to write the checks till it gets there? Because you can develop any lot, it just may cost you way more than it should, or way more than you can afford to develop it. And that's a perfect segue to my next question, because a lot of people want flat versus slope versus, they want mountains and valleys and whatever else on a lot. So can you kind of address that? What's an ideal lot, and what are you looking for when you're looking at elevation for the lot?
So my best case scenario is a slight slope, a slight grade across the entire lot. And I say that because, you would think that a flat lot is the best, but it really never is, because it makes it easier to build on. It makes it a little cheaper to build on, by all means. But the problem with a completely flat lot is that it's flat, and we're in, no matter what, it's not going to be perfect. So you're always going to have a little bit of water when it rains. You can't get the right grade on a flat lot to alleviate that problem. And it does become a problem because, buyers go into a situation with a flat lot with the expectation that, why do I have water pooling in the back right of my lot? Well, it's a flat lot and it can't be perfect. And I assume most of you guys have probably been in this area for a while. And for those of you who haven't, we were in a serious drought for a very long time. And about 4 or 5 years ago, that ended. And we've had a tremendous amount of rain. And that wreaked havoc on septic systems. And it greatly increased the water table. So that's why when you're driving around and you see flat farmland, there's water pooled up in it because the water table's so high, it has nowhere to drain. So flat lots, those are the considerations you have to think of, that, okay, it's nice because I can use it functionally, but I'm not going to have any grade. There's a potential for water pooling after it does rain, especially in winter months. It'll absorb faster in summer months. But like I said, I like a slight slope on it because you can still do, mono slab foundation, but the grading is a lot easier. And that is obviously a concern because you want to make sure the water's getting away from the house.
Awesome. So if, in summary, I'm gonna summarize everything we talked about when we're looking for a lot. And we didn't talk about this. First of all, you identify the lot. How you do that is completely up to you. There's many different ways. We all have access to MLS, so we can look that way. You can look online to see if there's a private sale available. You can even go as far as to find out who the parcel owner is, and maybe even reach out to them to see if they're interested in selling a parcel or a parcel of a parcel, a fraction of a parcel, and just do your research that way. And then from there, we're searching through municipal sites, i.e. GIS, trying to figure out soil compositions and evaluate how that soil composition relates to the ability to build on that lot, as well as building not the building code, but what is it? The art, what is it that we were talking about earlier? Help me out.
What soil suitability? What do we?
It was like R10, R12.
Oh, zoning.
The who?
Zoning.
Zoning. Thank you. I was having a brain fart. Sorry about that. So zoning, making sure you can actually build a house on it, making sure the soil is, i.e. suitable to potentially be able to build on it. And once you get past that point, now mind you, at this point, you probably haven't contracted anything, but you may have expressed that you're interested, right? So once you're able to establish that these things look like they're in favor for building a house there, now I would say go ahead and maybe proceed with the contract with the contingency that you can actually get suitable soil. And then, of course, during your due diligence process, you would go ahead and invest in a soil study through a soil scientist, which is going to cost you some money, and that's why you want to have it under contract at this point. There's no need in paying for testing soil that you don't even have the viability to own. And then from there, you can move forward with the whole process of establishing the development of the lot. We talked about septic versus sewer. We talked about why soil is so important to evaluate and why so much time is spent just talking about dirt, thinking about dirt, studying dirt before you even get a house in there. So, and then we kind of went over, and it's basic, guys, so don't take this to the bank. It's basic. We talked about kind of what numbers you guys should be talking about, what you should be advising your clients on when they're looking for raw land, and what they should prepare for as far as the cost to build a house on and start from scratch with raw land, essentially. So with all that being said, I gave you some resources, and I'll send this out later. I'm going to open the floor up for some questions that you guys have, and here are the rules. Don't ask about house building questions. Try to stay on lot, because I want us to get as knowledgeable as we can on land, and then we can build on top of that as far as building a house. And I'm going to start the show by checking the chat box first and making sure there's no questions there, and then we'll roll into it. Private soil scientists. Okay, so someone mentioned a private soil scientist costs more than an inspector downtown. Sean, you care to touch on that? Is there a difference? Can I get a downtown?
No, that's good information. And obviously Tanya's referring to actually applying for a septic permit versus hiring a soil scientist. And she's absolutely right. What they told her, when you're applying for a septic permit, you do have to have the corners of the lot staked off. So, and the actual house box staked off and a site plan submitted. So in order to do that, you've got to hire a surveyor. So again, that's more time, that's more money. And depending on where you're at, which county you're at, the cost for an actual septic permit can range from Scotland County's 150, Harnett County's 750 or 775. I think Connie's talking about Cumberland County, which is what, $400. So there's wide variety in actual septic permit cost. And that's why it may be more beneficial, depending on their costs, to hire a soil scientist for initial quick evaluation. If you hire a soil scientist, you don't have to have, they can kind of give you an overview, and they don't necessarily need the corners of the lot staked or where the house is going to go. They can just say, hey, there's generally good soil in this general area. So that may be a good starting point, depending on your situation. And I think she was saying that she's selling the lot. That, yeah, I would say it would definitely be good to have some information about the soil suitability, because your buyer's definitely going to be looking at that. So I think it's a good idea to be able to say, hey, we've got, a soil scientist has evaluated my lot. There's enough good soil for a 4-bedroom house, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think suitability changes value. Looking at this from a perspective of, if I'm representing a seller that wants to sell some land, I may encourage them to get a soil test, because if they got really good soil, then that land is more valuable than if it's not good soil. It's the use, the land use has more value to it. Shalanda's asking, I'm sorry, it might be Shalinda. Sorry if I mispronounced that. She's asking, if land is designated to be in a flood zone, would you stay away from it, or would you think it would be beneficial to buy? And that's for you, Sean.
Yeah, I would stay away from it. It's just, there's no reason. There's plenty of other good land out there. I mean,
even if it was a super good deal. Yeah, we know what kind of issues it causes us on the real estate agent side, trying to sell a house on it, because now you have to disclose, and then the buyer has to be able to get flood insurance and blah, 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 blah. And so it does become quite a hassle. But I would venture to say, in this market, you look very closely, because there may be properties that you're showing that's in a designated flood zone because of diminishing inventory. It's a good deal for a reason. Good comment there. Okay, guys, what questions do you have? I guess the best way to do it is raise your hand, and I can't see all of your hands, but go ahead, Trisha, you're first.
Okay, so Sean, a couple things. One, if Cumberland County doesn't allow like a septic system, the soil is not suitable for it, Do they allow mound systems, do you know, or not?
So usually the way it works, because I ran into this a few times where the county will go out there, they'll probably say to you, if they can't figure out, they'll probably say you need to hire an independent soil scientist for an evaluation and to design a system, a unconventional system or an alternative septic system. And so I don't know. I think the only time the county would actually recommend or help you with that specific piece of it is if it's a septic repair issue. If it's a new permit, because then, and again, I don't want to make 100% blanket statement here, but generally speaking, from my experience, if they're having to do a repair, they're much more willing to work with you because you're already there, you're established, there was a system. But if it's like a new construction kind of thing and they're like, there's no good soil here, maybe you could do a mound system, maybe you could do an alternative system, but you're going to need to hire a soil scientist for that. And, they would approve it pending an evaluation where, it was signed off on by a soil scientist, probably.
Does Cumberland County allow you to be out there while they're taking their samples, or they don't give you a time?
They don't give you a time. I mean, and they all say, hey, what's your current backlog? Oh, 2 to 6 weeks. And they may show up tomorrow or they may show up in 3 months from now. It's
just stand by for 2 to 6 weeks.
Yeah,
anywhere between 2 and 6 weeks, they'll show up.
You guys know the deal. Rhyme or reason to do it. So.
What's your preferred septic company in Cumberland County?
I use Gardner's, not related to me, without a D, septic. Eddie's really good. He just does, I think, primarily installation. He doesn't do like service or pumping or anything like that, but he does all our septic systems. Real good guy, and he's got a good reputation.
Okay. And one last question. I don't know if you've done wells in Cumberland County or not.
I have, yes. Okay.
For a deep water well, who would be your preferred company?
Well, we're actually in that situation right now. And I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to briefly speak on that. For normal wells, we use B&S. For a rock well or a deep well, Bill's Well has been pretty responsive to us. And with that, that's an important piece on the whole, lot viability. So if you don't have public water, and a lot of these locations do have public water, even kind of spread out. So if you don't have public water and you need a well, make sure you have a well guy go out there and tell you, hey, is this going to be a standard well or do I need something special? Because you're talking about $3,000 to $10,000 difference in price, and you definitely want to know that going in.
And then if you ever, like in a small subdivision, I don't know what type of water you had, like in your Linden properties, if you needed well or if it was already on.
Yeah, those are going to be well, and they're deep wells.
Okay, so can you do one community well? Would you do that, or would you
No.
do deep wells for each one?
I would for each, and just because I think you kind of get into more issues later on, especially when you're selling and where is the well located and who's responsible for it. So in an effort to avoid that.
Yeah, Trisha's asking for some personal reasons, I bet, because she just bought a really nice parcel of land. So I'm just gonna call her out on it.
If it's like a family compound or something.
That's something like that.
I've done the family compound piece, so that's done. I'm meeting with Harnett County or Cumberland County at 11 to discuss the septic. We've already done. We were going to hire a soil scientist, but what we did is we Googled perk test, and we kind of did that all over the lots, just to kind of see what we thought. And then we staked it out, and then now we're going to Cumberland County to, pay the $400 per lot. But I didn't know if there was any more I should be doing before I meet with them.
I don't think so.
Thanks, Edric.
and she's going to build me a tiny home on it, so I'm super excited. Great questions, though. Thanks for asking them, Trisha. Another question that popped up is protected species. Is there a way to find out if there's protected species, and how does that limit what you can do or what you can't do when it comes to developing land?
I've never honestly come across that. The only thing I come across is like conservation zones, conservation easements, and so yeah, I've never actually come across anything to deal with that. You deal with, in terms of actual like larger scale development, you deal with wetland stuff a lot because they're crazy about that kind of stuff. And it's but in terms of the actual species, I've got no experience on that.
Okay, awesome. Go ahead. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, I only asked because we had that problem up north, is that we had a huge land of property that they built a house on, but then they were only permitted a certain building zone because of the protected turtles that were in the area. So they weren't allowed to build on all the property that they had or have access to change things because the turtles were protected. I didn't know if that was a thing down here too.
I've never came across that. Those of us who spend any time on Fort Bragg know about the red cockaded woodpeckers and the white stripes around the trees. But yeah, I've never ran into that in terms of any land development on my side. So good question though.
The only thing turtles are good for down south is eating. All right, sloping. Any ideas how to read sloping on GIS? How much is too much slope? As you mentioned, Sean, all GISs are different.
Again, good question. So we were talking about the contours, and again, the different GISs have different contour intervals. The best to go is the smallest, and I think a lot of them have the 2-foot contours. So what you can do is, just to give you an idea, so let's pretend that a normal house box is, we'll say 50 feet by 50 feet, just an average house box size. If you pull up the GIS, you pull up that piece of land, and then you select the contour overlay, you can actually take the measurement tool and measure from one line to another to get the distance. And if you're on a 2-foot contour interval, and then the distance is about 50 feet, you know that from the front of the house, on a general size house, from the house to the back of the house, it's going to drop 2 feet or raise 2 feet. So that if you kind of combine those two features, the contour overlay with the measurement tool, you can have a good idea of how much slope there is. And the question is, how much slope is too much slope? Well, obviously the steeper it is, the more, it's kind of just a visualization kind of thing in your head. And just think about your house. If the back of your house was 10 feet lower than the front, it's a lot of slope, right? If it's 2 to 4 feet, and again, that's going to determine the foundation you need, because if you start getting on that steeper slope, you're going to need a crawl space, a large crawl space, possibly.
Which costs more money.
Yeah. So it's really, I think the trick is visualize it in your head. If I span that 50 feet on GIS and I cross over 3 contour lines, okay, well, crap, that could be 6 to 8 feet difference. So that's relatively steep for a house.
Yeah. And I would say the best thing to do is to walk it and,
Sure.
get that feel for what it feels like. And of course, this isn't to say that it's bad to have a sloping lot, because that actually naturally that's beautiful. Just know that it's going to cost you a lot more money to build a house on it. When that time comes, it's not going to be a general construction project. Guys, feel free to unmute and ask what questions you have with the last few minutes we have left. Don't be shy. Oh, this is a quiet bunch.
We covered everything. There's nothing left.
Good. That means we did a really good job.
Who's your soil scientist?
I use Mike Akers or Hal Owens. I've also used, is it Alex Adams? There's not many of them. And that's why, there's all kinds of development going on. There's not many of them, and there's a high demand. So just like we're seeing with prices, supply versus demand, and that's why they're so backlogged. And yeah, but Hal's a really good guy. He's out of Harnett County. Mike Akers all over. He does a lot of huge projects. He was the state's soil scientist, so he's probably one of the most qualified people in the state.
Mike was the only one I'd heard of. And why did you get out of flipping?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I could see, like I said before, I could kind of see the writing on the wall, because it was more people were getting involved and they were paying too much. So it was getting harder and harder to find properties. And I had to get better at finding stuff and better at the business, then things were getting more difficult. So it was and it wasn't a real business in that, you know, it was all based on people getting more or less foreclosed on or being in dire straits. So it wasn't a real business. It's a good opportunity for some people to make extra money but it wasn't a real business. And that's why I really wanted to move to new construction, so we could actually start, I don't want to say legitimate, but more of a real business.
And I'll just add to that, one thing about it over the years is Sean has never compromised on the product. So a lot of investors, as you know, acquisition prices went up and they had to pay more for the house, they just did less to it. And so you get in a position to where now you're passing off a nightmare to a potential buyer. And once it gets to that point, it's just not worth it anymore. And, you know, I know he definitely wants to deliver a signature product. So instead of trying to find something out there and making it his signature product, it became easier just to start from scratch, which, you know, it brings on its own hassles from time to time.
When do you think you'll have like a plat for the lots in Liberty Meadows?
I think I'm going to start, you know, we've got to do a couple more steps to kind of finalize things. So I'm thinking by springtime is probably when we'll start figuring out all those pieces, and in terms of timing, availability, and all that. So I would say March, April timeframe will be kind of starting putting stuff out there.
And they're going to be about how big?
About half acre. Yeah, and this is well, I don't know. Well, so one of the problems we had was that we were in the middle of submitting our plans for review to Harnett County, and that summer, like a month before, they decided to change their Harnett County. The people are great to deal with. Like, I can't say anything bad about anybody in planning and inspections. They're great people, but they have rather cumbersome regulations there. It is the hardest county to build and develop in our general kind of Fort Bragg area by far. And what I was getting at is they changed their requirements where you were no longer allowed to include any wetlands in your development, in your lot. So, you know, a lot of times you could have a larger lot in the back, small strip of the land, maybe had some wetlands. Well, they changed that. So wetlands had to be their own separate space, which kind of forces a developer, well, now I can't use up all the land with lots. So now I've got less lots, I've got more roads, and I almost have to have an HOA now, because somebody's got to own all these unused spaces that Harnett County is requiring. So, but anyways, that's just a side note.
Nightmare, right in the middle of getting it ready. Yeah. So like lot 42, that 9 something acre lot out in Summerlin, that's a prime example. There's some wetland up there. Based off the guidelines now, you have to build your lot around that wetland and then figure out who's going to pay pay the taxes and maintain the wetland, which it's going to get worse. And I'm glad you guys brought this up, because that's a question I want to ask you, Sean. Where do you see new construction development going as we proceed forward? Because this market is really crazy right now, and you would think it's great for builders, but I hear different things. What are your thoughts?
It's very difficult, and it's getting more difficult. And it's great that houses are selling, but the problems are that you've got so much instability with pricing, right? Your framing prices have more than doubled, and that's your biggest cost for construction is lumber cost. So, and you're kind of seeing that kind of permeated in the final sales price of homes. Home prices are going up because they kind of have to, or there would be no new construction to an extent. There's a lot of various factors, but that's one of them for sure. But you're seeing less land being available, increased cost to develop the land, and higher cost to build. So everything's just squeezing it and getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. So it's making it difficult, and it's creating a lot of problems. And as long as the demand stays there, it's going to be very difficult to, facilitate that demand to actually. I mean, I don't see there's not going to be any change in the shortage of inventory for any time in the near future, unless the demand diminishes, exponentially.
Yeah, and I don't think it will, especially with everything going on just in society. A lot of people are tending to want to work more from home, so that creates the requirement for a different living space than they were probably used to before. I guess I'm not going to say fear is, but I would say more my concern is, where do you see the building industry in general? Are builders going to go out of business because they have too many buyers and can't afford to build the house? And does that mean it's going to be more of a conglomerate of builders, bigger time builders that are building regionally, which may not do as nice a product because they're building based off of volume versus quality?
Well, I honestly, I don't have any insider information by any means. I'm just speculating based off of common sense and logic, but there's no way you can spend $15,000 to $20,000 extra on a new construction house and spend more than anybody ever has on your actual lot cost and make any money as a small to medium sized builder. If you haven't figured that out as a builder, then the only thing you're doing right now is you're taking construction draws and you're just taking money out of one pocket and putting it in another. So it's great that they have all these pre-sales, but that most of us do. But if your margins are diminishing that fast and liquidity is your largest concern as a builder, then things have to come to a head at some point. So then play it out. What happens if some small and medium builders go out of business because they weren't able to maintain? Well, now you've got even less inventory being produced and still high demand. So who knows what's going to happen? But I think the bottom line is that the only thing we all can do is, make ourselves better at our jobs, learn more, grow more. Because the bottom line is, you're always
it's going to force people who want to be in this business to create the best product, to constantly compete for the business that's out there. And I think that's a great thing. That's what free enterprise is all about. So it doesn't bother me at all. If you provide value, you don't have to worry about ever being challenged in any sort of business that you go in. Since you didn't say it, and I didn't want you to have to say it, Vanessa said it. She said she's already had 2 builders say they're not building homes anymore because of the pricing. It's just they can't afford to build. Yeah. And I'm not going to say one of them, but you guys can look in the group chat if you want to. So it's already happening. Mm-hmm. And just so you guys can educate your clients when they're talking about building, it's not that builders don't want to build. It's just that the viability of it is becoming increasingly difficult. And a lot of that has to do with this. A lot of builders have been just kind of flying by the seat of their pants. They'll just throw something up, put a price on it, make their profits or whatnot, and they haven't been watching as meticulously. And I'll give credit to Sean for this. They haven't been watching meticulously how quickly pricing is just exploding, pricing for the actual construction cost. Because every dollar you have to spend to build the house is a dollar less that you will make in margin. So where's that fine line come to? And it's at a certain point, a builder may say, this isn't even worth the risk for me, especially if they're building a lot of spec and on a mass scale. If the market does change, they don't want to be sitting on that inventory. So,
yeah. And can I kind of jump into that real
Please.
fast? That's absolutely accurate. And so one of the main reasons why we got involved in land development is because everything that we do, and we do things a lot differently than other builders, but everything we do comes from the finished product that we create. So you take the finished product and you backwards plan everything. And where the starting point ends up, right? If you backwards plan long enough to get to that starting point, you end up with, I need to have a lot that's buildable for X cost in order to build this product and make enough money to stay in business, right? So I was seeing out there, holy crap, these lots, builders are selling other builders these lots for a ridiculous amount of money. I can't buy a lot for that cost and make any money and actually grow a business. Again, when you have to be so liquid. So that's kind of why
not to mention deliver the same product. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, one more thing with that. I've talked to other builders and, everybody's happy about the pre-sales and whatnot, but they're starting to cut corners is the wrong word. They're not cutting corners, but they're offering less in their houses. So no refrigerators, no upgrades that they would put in other times because they don't have to because the demand's there. Well, I'm not going to do that. So we're going to maintain the same product, even though it's getting more difficult to find products to actually put in houses. My view is that you maintain the same quality product, and you don't fluctuate the integrity of the product based on market conditions. So.
And now I'm going to put on my lawyer hat and just say that his intention is never to take anything out of the product unless he's forced to.
Yeah.
And some of y'all gonna be mad at me and say, Sean used to provide refrigerators and now he doesn't. And I'll say, well, he still would, but we can't find any.
That's a funny thing because we are still providing refrigerators, but I can't provide counter depth refrigerators. You can't buy those right now. But yeah, sorry, yeah.
All right. Well, look, this is a great stopping place. I'm gonna stop it here. I know you guys probably have a lot more questions. I promise you this won't be the last time we have Sean on a call. I want you guys to become as educated as you can about just the whole building process, because then you can better help your clients. If you are looking to build a house in the near future, hopefully some of this has been insightful for you to help you kind of plan that process out and kind of understand what the other side, what it looks like behind the curtain. And I just want to say thank you to all of you who joined us today. We appreciate you for coming on and just trying to get some insight and become better at your craft. And until next time, which next time will be tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. There's my plug. We're going to have KV Core website training. And tomorrow evening, we'll have contract training. So we'll see you there. Until then, stay bold.
Thanks for your time, Sean.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much
Appreciate it.
for inviting us.